Previously on this manhwa, our female lead in an attempt to break off her engagement to Daimos, the former emperor of the empire who ascended to the throne after assassinating his father. She approached some knights outside the celebration in her castle and pleaded that they violate her, but their mood was brought to a quick shift after learning she's a Re-Diet, a barbaric race with red hair, a race lower than a beast treated as less than livestock. But she wasn't just an ordinary Re-Diet. After closer observation they realized she's Catherine Caliburn, the illegitimate daughter of the late Duke Caliburn. Acknowledging her noble image, the knight agreed to lay with her, but at that moment her fiancé appeared, thwarting her plans. Later it was revealed that her fiancé was aware of her true race and still loved her regardless, and they shared their first night together, but his loving attitude towards her changed, his words became cold and his gaze even worse. The manhwa continues. As she walks around trying to navigate her father's grave, she pauses wondering what direction his grave is in, because everyone is so busy passing by she can't even ask. Soon she freezes as a wet sensation touches her feet. She stands still in fear, unable to turn around to investigate. After some moment, she slowly tilts her head backward, that is until she notices the cute little puppy by her feet. She goes down observing the puppy. Compared to this puppy, the military dogs from the Duke's estate were so dignified and impressive, but this one is as cute as a stuffed toy. She picks it up and stares blankly as wonders why it was in the middle of the road and where its owner could possibly have gone. Just then a lady rushes forward and the puppy hurries to her. The lady thanks her for taking care of Luna, stating it is only thanks to her she was able to catch it. The lady observes her appearance, glancing down at every one of her accessories, and then goes into panic after realizing she's nobility. She lowers her head, immediately questioning how she could ever repay her kindness. However, Catherine asks her but to worry, revealing she also enjoyed the moment as well. The lady, however, continues, mentioning someone like her couldn't even brush against the clothes of someone as noble as she in a lifetime. All the while Duke Daimos stands behind a tree listening to the lady invite her to her shop, insisting she must repay her kindness. She guides Catherine to her flower stall where she asks her to pick any flower of her choice. She shares that she's just gotten a bunch of beautiful flowers from the auctions that day. She spots a flower and asks Catherine what about it, explaining the flower is really popular those days. However, when Catherine glances at the flower, she recalls the Duke Daimos Pendragon playing a flower in his hair and asking if it suits him. She gets flustered, but she quickly pulls herself together enough to hear the lady ask if she likes daffodils. The lady compliments her, stating she has a modest taste, and proceeds to gift it to her. However, Catherine refuses, insisting she'll pay for it herself. The lady, however, insists with a plea that she accepts it as a token of her gratitude, while Catherine remains still. Somehow the view of the outside world is fascinating, filled with warm and kind smiles, and also generous people like Luna's owner. A smile of satisfaction forms on her face as she realizes she should have insisted on venturing to the outside world sooner, even if she had to beg her father. The sound of a person's voice, however, startles her back to reality as she yells, "You idiot!" She turns around to find a lady scolding a Re-Diet slave, questioning how she could be so late in delivering the heat stones that morning. The lady grumbles that all Re-Diets are lazy and then orders her to drop the heat stones and get lost already. The Re-Diet slave turns to Catherine, startling her. However, before she can speak, the lady smacks her on her head. The lady presses her with her foot, asking how she can look directors at someone of a higher status like that, and if she hadn't already asked her to get lost. Catherine can only watch the terror unfold in front of her, unable to do anything but even worse. She's shocked by the reaction of the others. How can they just stand there and watch another person being beaten like that? Not even looking, not even helping. Making the situation a normal occurrence. Now a harsh realization settles in her mind. That's why the Duke let her go so easily, to show her that in their eyes, she's nothing more than a beast, and he revealed it in that manner. She turns sharply as she notices the lady raise her hand again with the stick, thinking at that rate she'll beat him to death if she continues. She hovers above the person, acting as a shield, and after a while, she opens her eyes trying to figure out why she doesn't feel any pain. Then she notices a man with blonde hair holding the stick. Daimos Pendragon. She asks him how he's there, and with a smile he shares that he was worried about her like a child left by the water. She'd unknowingly let her hood fall, and as the lady faces her ginger hair she questions how she's a re-diet, when everything from her speech to attire screamed nobility. The people around begin to mutter, questioning what is going on. Is she a nobleman's mistress? Ah, could she be the rumored Lady Caliburn? That must be it, right, the only re-diet noble is her. They grumble that seeing her in person is even more bizarre. I mean, him, no matter how much she dresses like a person, in the end she's still just a beast. She grips her gown tightly as the realization sinks in, that is why her father and brother never sent her out of the dukedom. Daimos glances at her trembling, then a smirk forms on his face as he questions. Have you finally understood your position? Diker arrives just in time and greets the Grand Duke. Mutters fill the air again as they question if the man standing is the Grand Duke, while Diker apologizes as he reveals he'd lost sight of him in the crowd. However, the Duke's answer leaves him stunned. He tells him it's fine. Pulling out his sword, he retorts that he'd come just in time. His expression shifts as he suddenly points the sword at the lady. He declares that he will execute her on the spot for threatening the Grand Duchess of Pendragon with a weapon. But that's not all. He mentions that all those who nicked the Grand Duchess with their filthy tongues will all be executed. They immediately begins pleading. They explain that they'd misspoken and beg for him to spare them, but he only retorts. A lady with re-diet blood is laughable, but a madman who killed his own father is frightening. The Duke turns to Diker and asks if he isn't going to help, however a voice cuts through the air. Catherine pleads for him to forgive their wrongdoings, but he only scoffs, asking if her ears are too bad to hear their murmuring. Lowering her gaze, she explains that she'd heard it all too, but the lady she's never met before tried to give her flowers. She adds that they're all precious citizens of Caliburn and asks him to spare their lives, thinking they can't soil the land named in Caliburn's honor with blood for such a trivial reason. The Duke glances at her, and the next moment he drops the sword to the ground and congratulates her, saying she just did something no one else could do. As he pulls her along with him, she expresses her confusion and he explains that she stopped him, saving their lives in the process. You've become my wife and are already accomplishing everything, isn't it amazing? Ah, no, there's just one thing you can't do. Escape from me. Just as she's about to, and what that means, she hears someone call out to her. The re-diet slave on her knees urges her to sing the song of the river and remember what her true self is. Later, as they walk, her gaze softens as she admits it bothers her. Her mind reels. What did that old re-diet woman say to her earlier? Even though she can't understand the Asekan language, she could tell it seemed important. The Duke, gazing at her with his arms crossed, finally stops and asks if she's mad at him. She hurriedly denies it and he pokes her head in response, asking, "Really?" She places her hood on her head and then slowly reveals, he broke his promise first. He doesn't seem to understand and she explains that he said he would make her loved more than any other woman under the sky, but he keeps acting strange and mean to her. She ends her statement saying she doesn't understand his thoughts at all, but the Duke is mesmerized by the look on her face. You know how to make that kind of face? It's a face I've never seen before. Lifting her head, he questions. So if I do this, what kind of new expression would you show me? He kisses her in that moment, leaving the people on the street surprised that their netters spread to Catherine. Immediately she pushes him away and asks, Your Highness, what is this in the middle of the street? After getting her reaction, he thinks, oh, so you make this kind of face. He pulls her forward and then responds that he's loving her more than any other woman under the sky, but she doesn't seem to notice. He mentions that she asks him not to kill people, and also they're walking together like that through the festival street, and he also has forgotten to take her to her father's grave. Her expression immediately shifts as she asks if they were on their way to her father's grave. He asks where she believed they were heading to, and she explains that he seemed angry, so she thought they were just walking around aimlessly. The Duke then points at a spot and shares that once they pass that market street they'll be there soon, and she comments that he knows the way despite its complexity. Walking forward, the Duke reveals it's because he's been there in a previous life. Again with the previous life talk, whether he's joking or serious I'm not sure, but why does the Archduke talk about his previous life so often? A thought comes to her mind, but she struggles to accept it. Then, to confirm her suspicions, she calls the Duke and shares that she has something to ask. You said before you're living your second life now. Then perhaps, did we meet in your previous life too? The Duke stares at her blankly for a moment before turning away. He goes to a trader selling fruits and takes an orange. As he holds it, he mutters that the oranges must have been grown with headstones to be available in summer. He throws the orange to her and asks that she have a taste, addressing her as my lady, which leaves her surprised. With a smile he explains, "That a Seekin lady earlier called you that, my lady." As they walk he retorts that even to that old woman's eyes she must have appeared so noble, but she responds countering his statement and says, "But I'm just your excellency's possession." My possession? That's quite a charming way to put it. Teasingly he mentions, when someone is taken as a prisoner they can become a personal property. If I say I kidnapped the Lady Asekin from the Caliban castle and made her mine, wouldn't that be somewhat accurate? Hearing you say that with your own mouth makes it irresistibly cute, he ends. Catherine, already flustered, adjusts her hood, wondering what he's suddenly saying. The Duke then asks how long she's going to hold on to the fruit and if she's planning on placing it on her father's grave instead, but she explains that she just doesn't feel particularly hungry at the moment. The Duke cuts in, shouting that it was all lies as he points out that she hasn't had anything to eat since she got up. Her response, however, leaves the Duke stunned. With a calm voice she admits it's actually because she doesn't like oranges. The Duke immediately questions how that's real, reflecting on how she used to come to him holding a basket filled with oranges, claiming the oranges were so delicious she thought to share them with him. He turns away, confusion evident. He grabs some daffodils out of the pot, commenting that it's strange. Holding the flower he turns to her and asks if she still likes them, mentioning he caught her staring at them earlier. Her expression changes and she immediately expresses her excitement, explaining that they are flowers her father used to gift her often, so she loves them. The Duke with a rather cold tone remarks, "Another thing you like just the same, less and less." Catherine on the other hand wonders who in the world he could be comparing her to. By chance, could it be the me His Excellency met in his previous life? They continue walking and a butterfly flies by, then Catherine shares she used to enjoy making wind-up butterflies. The Duke, curious, asks why her statement is in past tense and she explains, saying, no matter how pretty they were, she quickly lost interest because in the end, they were fake. But now she understands. No matter how much one attaches wings, or attempts to mimic the appearance of a real butterfly. She recalls how Lancel would ask the Duchess Caliban why she was allowed to go out with them, and she would always give him the same answer. She would tell him he knows the reason, and yet he still asks, "That child is not like us." No matter what, a wind-up butterfly could never become a real butterfly. Now she understands too well. No matter how much she tries to, she simply cannot escape from the re-diet fate either. After a while of walking, the Duke breaks the silence. He mentions they're almost at the cemetery and asks if there's anything else she wants to see, explaining that moment might just be the last time she ever steps foot in the Caliban Duchy. She turns her head, searching around until something catches her eye and she decides she's found a place she would love to see. Later, the Duke stands by her side asking if she's sure that is it. "Isn't it amusing?" she muses. A portable 3-tier foldable toolbox that fits in one hand, it's amazing. She yaps endlessly about the toolbox while the Duke stands staring blankly at her. He glances at her and thinks, that's a side of her he's never seen in his past life. But it makes complete sense knowing how the only time they spent together was confined to that tower. He calls her and mentions how she asked him earlier if he met her in his past life. Back then you were completely different, you didn't like the same food and you never once stepped outside of your home. She asks if she didn't even step out one time and he says yes, adding for her entire life. Deep in thought she mutters, "Different tastes, different lives. Then, she turns to him sharply and muses. That person and I are completely different people, because I'm here now. In a new scene, they arrive at the Grand Cathedral and Catherine can't help but look around, fascinated by the overwhelming presence of the Grand Cathedral. She locks eyes with the Duke and gets flustered immediately, then she asks why he's looking at her like that. The Duke then remarks, it's obvious you're new here and it's adorable. The Archbishop comes out and greets him, but the Duke only turns to Catherine and with a whisper he asks, how is it? Isn't this situation amusing? A sinful man who killed thousands including his own father because I donated a hefty sum, the Archbishop comes out and bows to me. With a scoff he shares out loud, I wonder. God knows how shallow they all are. In a panic she questions his words, asking how he can speak such in front of the Archduke, but instead he apologizes, begging her not to be mad, and then shares that instead he won't do it in front of them. Satisfied? A priest immediately extends his hand to the sides, blocking their paths as they attempt to go in. The Duke, surprised by the insolence, asks what it is about and he apologizes. He explains that a conclusion has not yet been reached regarding Lady Calibran's access, so he can only exercise patience until the bishops finish their discussion. The Duke, confused, asks why she needs those old men's permission, and the Archbishop steps in, offering his apology as he explains. Your Grace, I'm sorry, as a rule in the sacred temple, no animals are permitted to enter. He continues, sharing that the deliberation will be over soon and asks that he waits just a little longer. The Duke lets out a sigh of frustration, and as he opens the toolbox he mutters under his breath, what? That's the only reason? He picks up a screwdriver and retorts that he thought it was something serious before lunging at the Archbishop. As the Archbishop trembles under the weight of his arm pressed on his throat, the Duke only turns to Catherine and asks, Catherine, aren't you curious? What the tongue of those who speak God's will look like? To the Archbishop he apologizes and shares that if he had any idea he would end up pulling out his tongue he would have brought his sword. This is going to hurt a lot. Catherine immediately reaches to stop him. Holding his arm, she pleads, Please, I'm begging, you don't do this. He lowers his hand and the next moment drops the screwdriver to the floor, saying if she doesn't want him to he wouldn't do it. With his arm placed around her neck he retorts, Honestly, ever since I met you, every day feels like patience training. The priests open the door and as they walk he asks her to raise her head, reminding her not to forget she's in a position where everyone must acknowledge her. Later she stands in front of the door and states she'll be going to her father now, and the Duke accepts and only asks that she doesn't leave him alone for too long else he would be bored, and she laughs, saying sure. Just as she's about to go in, she turns around and thanks him for bringing her to her father's mausoleum. It's all thanks to you, Your Grace. I'll be back quickly, she ends, but the Duke, frozen from shock, can only question. What is this? What I wanted was clearly Catherine's miserable downfall, so why do I keep wanting to see that smile again? He recalls her statement, if their tastes and lives are completely different then that person and her are completely different people. He scoffs at that statement as he mutters, That woman I hated enough to defy death itself, is completely different from you? Then what happens to my revenge? No, before that, why is it this moment a choice appeared, the choice that I didn't have to hate you? Like at the end of that nightmare. Why do I start wanting happiness with you? Moments later, as the Duke stands in front of the door awaiting Catherine, Diker appears. He reports that he's found the item he requested. He passes it to the Duke, and as the Duke holds it in his hand he comments that it appears to be in a better condition than he'd expected, and Diker explains. Ever since the afternoon it fell into the water they have been searching urgently, then they finally managed to retrieve it from the deep, and though they were quite concerned, fortunately the functionality remains intact. The Duke praises his work and Diker lowers his head, just about to take his leave when he holds up the toolbox and asks what's in it, noting how the priest had handed it over with a rather terrified expression. The Duke in response reveals that the Grand Duchess of Pendragon smiles because of it, so he should make sure to take good care of it. As Diker walks he holds the box, confused. It resembled just an ordinary toolbox, so Inside, Catherine stands holding the daffodils as she asks, "Father, I came to find you too late, didn't I?" As she places the flower, she apologizes for not even bringing proper flowers for the offering. Also, she notes that there's something she must tell him. Back when her father was alive, he appeared totally surprised after learning the Grand Duke of Pendragon has expressed his intention to marry her. He remained stiff like that for a while before breaking into a hesitant laugh. Then later he mentioned he wouldn't allow it, saying he doesn't know what he's planning. "Don't worry, Catherine, I will personally see to it that this marriage never happens," her father finished. Now as she stands, she laughs at the absurdity of everything. "You promised to protect me like that, but in the end I still married the Grand Duke." Now she considers the probabilities. If you had passed away from exposure to thermal stones during your research, maybe my engagement with the Grand Duke would have been annulled, or maybe I would still be here preparing to become his wife. She goes down as she shares, "But father, it's so strange. Unlike my life at the ducal estate, where I always felt alone, when I'm in his arms I feel like I finally have a place to lean on." She laughs hesitantly as she continues, "It must sound strange to you, right?" She explains that it's something difficult to say to anyone else, but she wanted to be honest with him. A familiar sound distracts her, and after listening more she realizes it's a music box. She prepares to leave, but first she mentions to her father that the Grand Duke is calling for her, so she should go. She rubs her hand along the engraving as she admits she will miss him a lot, but at that moment something draws her attention. The engraving is actually in a Seekan script, but it's odd that something like that would be written on her father's coffin. She reflects on how she'd barely understood the words of the old Seekan woman earlier, but she used to read Seekan's books in her father's study from time to time, so just a few words might be fine. She proceeds to read the words. "Longing, my soul. Remember your song, against the river of oblivion, against the river of hatred, against the river of sorrow, against the river of grief, cross the fieldsa and become the sinner. And return to me." Her heart sinks and her head begins to hurt. As she holds her head up in pain, the sound of the music box rings continuously in her head. "Right now, my head feels like it's going to split open." She drops to the floor and back to the moment when she was still young. She arrived at the tower and was celebrating evading her brother Lancel on her way there. As she walks up the tower, she goes through the items in the basket. A smile forms on her face as she anticipates Deem's face as he enjoys the meal. The last time she'd forgotten to bring a drink, but this time she had the milk tea all set. "Huh? Deem?" His absence registers in her head and terror spreads across her face. She recalls how when they laid together under the moonlight he'd suggested they go live in Acheron together. Surprised, she asks why, and he told her it's because there's someone he wants her to meet, the most precious person to him, someone he's been keeping hidden. Now as she rushes down the tower she can only recall his promise, so where could he have disappeared to? She reaches the bottom of the tower, and as she pants heavily, the next time she raises her head she spots her brother there standing short of words. He immediately rushed to her, demanding to know how long she's been sneaking in and out of the tower like that, but instead she could only mutter, "Brother, did you take Deem?" Her brother exclaims in shock before asking how she knows that traitor's name. "Don't tell me you came here because of him. That bastard is a criminal. He hid the Empress who tried to assassinate His Majesty." He scoffed at the absurdity, to think she's meeting a traitor who's about to be executed, but she didn't say a word. The next moment, she dashed out of the tower in panic. "That can't happen. Dean surely doesn't know anything. He was just helping his mother. If I explain his innocence to my father, Dean can still be saved." In the present day, she lays on the ground, shocked with her eyes open. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Duke standing outside hears strange noises coming from the room. He pushes the door open in an instant only to find Catherine lying on the floor trembling. He picks her up, while she mutters about her breathing being difficult. The longer he takes he feels her condition only worsening. Later, he sits with her in his arms asking if it's easier to breathe now. She opens her eyes slowly but she still appears to be in shock, but that doesn't stop her from speaking. Father. I heard everything from him. Where the escaped empress is hiding. I'll tell you everything from him, so please. This reliving past memory causes the prince to tremble. He yells at the top of his voice to know what she's doing right now. Why, in the end, does she make him hate her? He mentions how he dreamt of a normal life with her for a moment. I feel so foolish now. But that isn't all. She calls him and apologizes as she only now realized she must have told everything to her father. She pleads for his forgiveness but he only scoffs. After doing something like that, you're apologizing so easily? He grabs her jaw as he declares, No, Catherine, if you want to be forgiven by me, remember me properly first. After filling your world completely with mine, in the end be abandoned by that world, and live your life in the darkness, that is my forgiveness. Catherine, embarrassed, asks if they're going to do that there, but he just asks. Why? Your father and you have done even worse to me. He continues while she protests, internally questioning. In the place where my father rests, how could you do something like this? The Duke lifts his head as he notices something while Catherine turns her head to the voice and realizes the person speaking is her older brother. Their mom asks Lancel to take the flowers they'd prepared for their dad and he agrees. On the other hand, Catherine wonders what to do if her family were to discover what is happening right where her father is. Once the Duke realizes, he pinches her heart and asks what she's looking away from, causing her to cry out, continuously drawing the attention of her brother. Charlotte asks him what's wrong but he only mutters in disbelief before calling out. Catherine. Catherine bites her lip down, wondering if they were able to hear that. Rather, her brother clarifies that he only just remembered her bringing her some relief. Her brother draws their attention to the daffodils placed on the casket, which are her favorite flowers. Charlotte, unbothered, let out a scoff as she retorts, like I care, doesn't matter what she likes. Her older brother doesn't let it go and immediately turns to her. He shares that he's thought of it for a while already, but she's too harsh on Catherine. While Catherine holds herself from making any sounds, Charlotte snaps back. She remarks that he's just being soft, noting how everything is always about Catherine. Her last statement, however, leaves her brother in shock. She's just going to follow the Duke anyway. Her mother, to protect their heads, immediately intervenes. She questions Charlotte's disgraceful behavior at her father's resting place and pulls her outside. Outside, her mother reveals her brother is still in the dark about Catherine leaving the ducal estate and warns her to be careful what she says in front of him, but she exclaims that she doesn't care and instead, she hates everything. The Duke reaches his last straw. He calls Catherine and when he has her attention he asks, How long are you going to keep thinking about another man in front of me? Her gaze shifts to disbelief as she ponders. No way, he wouldn't dare. The Duke teasingly asks. What's wrong? You don't like it? But your body seems to want it. If you'd like, you could always call for your dear brother over there to help you. She asks him what he means, but he doesn't respond, and the next minute her expression shifts. The Duke only stares at her blankly while she struggles to control her voice with her brother present. On the other hand, Lancel ponders on how he keeps hearing strange noises. He turns to the door and questions if perhaps the noise is coming from the hymn recitation outside. He turns his attention back to his father and notes he'll just greet him briefly and be on his way. At this point, Catherine makes a sound again without realizing it. At that rate, she realizes she'll end up getting caught and instead searches for a way to muffle the sound. Your Highness, a kiss, please kiss me, she begs. A smirk forms on his face as he calls her name, and as he goes in for the kiss, he comments, You really are a devilish woman. Her brother turns away, and once he takes his leave, she relaxes on the floor. The Duke, looking down at her with a smirk on his face, retorts, Too bad they left. He pulls her up immediately and continues. You can make as much noise as you want, Catherine. As she trembles, he muses, "That's right, just like that." As she shouts, she ponders on the feeling of her head feeling like it's melting. The next moment, she gasps in shock as the Duke places her on all fours. Shocked, she asks him what he's doing and he responds saying, "What do you think, Catherine? I'm just getting started." Later, she lays asleep on the floor. He places a cloth around her and scoffs. To think she'd pass out from just this. As he watches her lay asleep on the floor, he reaches for her hair and retorts, "What a mess, I must be the only one who knows this side of you." As he watches her, he questions aloud, "Catherine, why did you abandon me?" In a new scene, Diker reports to the Duke. He mentions that the Duke of Caliburn realized that the lady has left the ducal and has begun moving towards the capital in search of her whereabouts. The Duke asks if that is so and then remarks that he is truly desperate to stop this marriage while he thinks, "She has long since become mine." The Duke orders him to make sure he never crosses paths with her on his way to the capital, if possible set up a decoy. Diker then reveals they'll disguise an empty carriage as if the lady is inside to throw off his pursuit. The Duke praises that suggestion, saying it should buy them at least 10 days, but Diker, worried, asks if they can really manage that long, and the Duke says of course. He calls the Duke Caliburn a fool who cannot distinguish between conviction and stubbornness, so even if he realized he made the wrong choice midway, he'll chase after an empty carriage to the very end. The Duke asks about Catherine's condition, and he shares that she'd just woken up and Dame Meitner has been assisting with her recovery. But he suggests, instead of Dame Meitner, wouldn't it be better to just assign another female knight to the lady's side? He continues, stating Dame Meitner is quite oblivious, and if she mentions something unnecessary again it might end up affecting the lady, but the Duke asks him to leave it. He reveals that it seems Catherine has taken quite a liking to her and states perhaps because it's the first time she has had something to play with. He reveals to Diker that he wants Meitner to grow arrogant by staying close to Catherine. Diker, surprised, struggles to speak in confusion, but the Duke reveals, no matter how arrogant or insolent a subordinate might be, if their master wields great power no one can touch them. He then shares his intention: he wants Catherine to realize the power she has just by staying by his side. "Do you understand?" he asks. On the other hand, Catherine sits awake in bed while Meitner goes around her, sharing she seems to have a bit of fever. Catherine reaches for her cooling pendant, but she doesn't find it and she wonders where her cooking pendant went. She tries searching around thinking she needs it to regain some strength, but Meitner advises her to stay in bed. Catherine, however, explains that it's too dangerous for her to touch and it'll be fine if she searches for a while. The next moment, she drops to the floor, and the next moment a voice asks if she's looking for this. She raises her head to find the Duke holding her pendant while he orders Meitner to leave. Once she takes her leave, she reaches for the pendant as she thanks him for bringing it to her, but just as she's about to grab it, he retracts his hand. He goes down and mentions that before that he has to confirm something. He then asks her how much she remembers about the previous day. Immediately her cheeks become flushed. In her memory she suddenly fell ill at her father's mausoleum, and when the Duke came to help her, he suddenly started saying that she's drunk. She turns her head away in embarrassment as she reveals she hasn't forgotten anything. The Duke, looking, then asks if that is so before proceeding. He repeats her statement. "Father, I heard everything from him. Where the Empress is hiding, I'll tell you everything I know, so please. You remember those words, don't you?" he asks, but Catherine just stares in confusion, asking what he's talking about. The Duke scoffs in annoyance. He mocks her, saying she so easily forgets memories that were so difficult to extract. He tosses her pendant to the floor, crushes it beneath his heel, then turns to her and asks, "How can you be so incredibly selfish?" Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and also comment your thoughts on this video.